Good evening. On behalf of iLead, a very warm welcome to this evening's session. The evening session is recalibrating the media landscape. There has never been a more exciting time in media as we navigate 2020 with all its challenges. Change in the media landscape is in fact accelerating at an unrelenting pace with new technologies, platforms, business models, continuing to shape and reshape the industry. Our speakers today will give you a glimpse into this exhilarating world with all its opportunities as well as challenges. Before I introduce the speakers to you, I'd like to briefly take you through the flow for this evening. We're going to hear from our speakers, our panelists, on their thoughts and perspectives. They will then engage in conversation with the moderator, Shubhati, for this evening. And then we're going to open it up for an interactive session of question and answers. So we're going to make that work a couple of ways. You can actually type in your question, if you have one, through the session in the chat box, which you have at the bottom. Or at the end, when we are opening it up for question and answer, just raise your hand, and that is another icon at the bottom, and we will, the administrator will allow you to join with your video and your audio off at that point of time, and you can ask the question to our panelists. It is my great pleasure to introduce Karma Paljor to you. Many of you may be familiar with Karma as a former senior editor and news anchor of CNN News 18. He's a great storyteller who is passionate about broadcast journalism and has over 20 years of experience working with CNN, IBN, CNBC, TV18, CNN News 18, and the Times of India. Karma has now combined his passion and experience and embarked on his entrepreneurial journey. He is co-founder and director for Athvi Infotainment, which aims to do path-breaking work in digital media and entertainment. He is editor-in-chief, chief of EastMojo.com, and also team leader of the Impulse Model Press Lab Core Committee. He has won many awards and accolades, some of the noteworthy ones being the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism in 2011 and 2014. The ENBA Awards in 2013 and 2014. He was declared the Indian Television Reporter of the Year in 2011. Karma is also a Chevening Scholar and an Aspen Fellow. Welcome, Karma. Joining him is Tanushree Hazarika. Tanushree is a serial entrepreneur focusing on media production and brand marketing. She founded Tattva Creations in 2010 and launched Brahmaputra Valley Film Festival in 2013, which has since become a landmark event. Tanushree's latest venture is Athvi Infotainment, a content production company which he co-founded with Karma in 2017. Eclectic Northeast, a print magazine, was Tanushree's first venture, which she headed up for over 11 years. A business management graduate from Boston University, Tanushree has previously worked in MNCs like Fidelity, Morgan Stanley in the US before starting her entrepreneurial journey in India. She's received many awards, including Young Communicator Award in 2010, Outstanding Woman Achievers Award in 2013. She's also founding member of the Young Leaders Connect and an Aspen Fellow. Tanushree has served as jury in the 64th National Film Awards. Welcome, Tanushree.
Thank you so much, Ritashri.
Moderating this session and being in conversation with them is Shubha Das Maulik, a media teacher and documentary filmmaker. Shubhati has made more than 50 documentary films on a variety of subjects. Her recent independent productions, Calcutta Sonata, and Dwelling and Traveling has been critically acclaimed in the festival circuit and bagged some prestigious awards. Her film, Promising Plastic Polymers, won the Bronze Beaver Award at the 9th National Science Film Festival. A postgraduate in physics, and after teaching for 10 years in the undergraduate level, she switched over to media studies and has never looked back. She has headed the Film Studies and Mass Communications Department at St. Xavier's College and also is faculty at iLead Institute. She's also visiting faculty at Maulana Azad University, Alia University, and Bishop Harodi. With that, over to you, Shubha. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritashri, for the introduction. So, welcome aboard all of you, and very good afternoon. So, I would like to begin by saying that I'm feeling very happy, tinged with a layer of sadness. Happy because obviously we all are looking forward to a very exciting session, exciting discussion. But the sadness stems from the fact that I am missing iLead Auditorium. Because I remember before an event like this, there is always this hustle and bustle. So where is all the hustle and bustle? Where are the student volunteers, the registration desk, the welcome cup of coffee? All that is missing because, the last 4 months have changed our lives radically. So our life has become more unostentatious, maybe a little cleaner, a simpler life. And most importantly, we all have really learned to grapple with technology. What my observation is that there was this virtual self dormant in all of us, which has suddenly aroused and awakened, and it is growing by the day for everybody. I mean, we are really living our virtual life to the fullest, taking classes, attending webinars, conducting webinars, judging festivals, attending festivals, virtual tours of mediums, and you name it. And in the process, some people have even become celebrities. So even though our bodies are confined indoors because of the lockdown, our spirits are soaring high and they are all over in the digital domain. And we are really very fortunate and very happy that there are two persons with us today, our special guests, who, if I may say so, they have conquered the digital domain and they have created little kingdoms, little empires of their own. And today they are going to share with all of you some secrets of their success and maybe, share their success story to inspire all the young and perhaps not so young attendees that we have today. So let me shoot away some questions. I'm all eager to hear from you. So perhaps my first question, allow me to ask my first question to Mr. Karma Paljor. As all of you heard, that he has been a broadcast journalist, a career broadcast journalist, and an award-winning one. He has won prestigious awards. Most importantly, he has specialized in a very important beat. I was just reading in his biodata that his specialized beat is disaster reporting. And in that also he has won some, got a lot of recognition and won some awards. So, but now he has stepped out of this mainstream journalism and he has created East Mojo. Among other things, I mean, he has created East Mojo. So my question is that this decision to step out and create something like East Mojo, something of your own, I mean, does it come from a calling, inner calling to go back to your roots? Or is it that as a mainstream journalist, you have always felt that certain stories, regions and people, they always remain in the shadows of big news and they never get a chance to surface and see the light of the day. So you want to shine spotlight over those regions. So why have you taken the decision and how do you envision East Mojo's role in the years to come? Let's hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. I think, it is a mix of all that you said. So your question kind of summed up my decision. I think 2004, when I was getting selected for a program, international program, that's when I thought that maybe, after 10 years, I would go back. So that's when I decided that at a certain point in my career, I'd like to go back, give back to the region I was from. That's the East. East for me is not Northeast only. East for me is everything starting, from Bihar, Jharkhand, Bengal, state which I've been very close to, Sikkim, Orissa, that entire region. So I feel that I wanted to give back. Also, every time I went back for any seminar, anywhere, students would often question me, why doesn't mainstream media cover us as well? And they only concentrate on the big cities. So many people die here, so many disasters happen. but we are not given importance. And that's when I said, look here, we need to tell our own story. We cannot wait for parachute journalists to come from big media houses from Mumbai and Delhi and tell their stories. We will do our own stories well. We will cover our own stories. So I guess that's what led me to start East Mojo, and also vital to finding the right person to start East Mojo with. I guess, I wouldn't go with anyone. So I met my co-founder Tanushree Hazarika at the right time, and there was confidence. And I felt that I could trust her because at that time, there were not very many people in the media because most of the media houses are dominated by or owned or supported by political parties. And in her, I saw a very confident young person whom I thought I could learn a lot from. And that's when I decided that I needed to do something, and we started Upfee Entertainment together.
Wow, very nice. So then over to Tanushree, the next question will be to you. You are also passionate about promoting the North, because you are also from Assam. And so you have conducted this Brahmaputra Film Festival, and through food and tourism, you want to bring the Northeast into the mainstream and create greater awareness, break certain myths and misconceptions, etc., etc. So how, what is your strategy? I mean, to what extent have you been successful, and what have been your strategies to steer your vision towards your goal? So let's hear from you.
So even I was away from Assam for a long time. So I was in the States. So I lived away for almost 8 years. And then I decided life was too mechanical in the US. And I was like, let me go back to Assam and see what can be done. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized that I knew so little of my own region and state and, people around. And that's how I started my first venture, which is a print media magazine. So I started it and then, I ran it for almost 11 years. And then besides that, I also got into another marketing venture. So where we do integrated marketing communications, which is Tattva Creations. And again, out of that platform, I realized that there was so much of talent, untapped talent in the region, especially in the film world. And so that's how a concept of Brahmaputra Valley Film Festival started. And then while I was just dabbling with media, marketing, communications, and then I realized that print media has its own boundaries, so you cannot go beyond. And that's when I sold the first venture, and luckily at the same time Karma happened to also want to start something in Northeast, so we were lucky. And then we were like, okay, so let's try digital, because I think the boundaries are limitless, and we can reach out to different audiences, starting with Northeast and growing from there on. And so that's how the different ventures started.
I see. Okay, so that's nice, and both of you, your visions match, so you can work together. So that's an excellent thing. So now, since you are into this marketing and you are this entrepreneurship, etc., and so it is, there's this saying that content is king. When we are in the digital domain, content is king. Okay, so if you have good content, that means half your battle is over. So how would you define a good content? In order to reach out to the people, you have to have good content in order to engage people. So how would you define good content?
So you are very right. Content is king. So, half the battle is already won if you have great content. But again, content is very defined by your audiences, right?
Right.
So if it's a 18-year-old person, so he would want a content of a different type.
Right.
Or if it's a middle-aged person, different, and of course demographically. So that's why I think it's very important to have the right content and also know how to deliver it to the right audiences.
Right. So getting your right audience, creating a content and getting to know your right audience.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that brings me to an concern, observation, whatever we call it. that this new media has actually redefined the media landscape. And it's not recent, I mean, it has been happening over years. And one of the characteristics of new media is that, you know, the difference between consumer and producer is blurred. Means, you know, we are at the same time, we can be producers, we can have our own blogs, our own websites, like that. So difference in consumer and producer is blurred. And during this pandemic, this lockdown situation, what I find that even renowned journalists are unable to go to the TV studios, so they're broadcasting from their homes and things like that. Okay, so that is the aura of the television studio. So that is also gone. All right. So that then the thing is that, is it a good thing that, you know, everybody is has now the power to be a producer, to give out content? I mean, not just merely passively consume content given out by the mainstream media. Okay. So what are the advantages and what are the flip sides of it? Maybe Karma can also join in. Both of you can answer this. That. In today's scenario, when anybody can be a consumer as well as a producer, okay, and without passing through any kind of a gatekeeping process and all that. So is it good or bad? So what are the good sides? What are the things that we have to be a little careful about?
I think there is a very easy answer to your question. That, you know, there was a monopoly before. It was a one-way street where anchor or a senior journalist who held a television channel, who ruled over a newspaper, ruled over, and he would say that, okay, he would kind of give a sermon. Usually our new age journalists also now give a sermon only on TV, but they held a kind of a very monopolistic position where they came in at a designated hour in the evening and gave you news. Now there are two sides to it. One, of trust, whether you trust the journalist or not. Usually in the beginning, yes, the journalist could be trusted. There was a lot of research that went in. And if a journalist did put out fake news or a wrong news, then the backlash was also huge. Yeah. So that was the situation before, and there was a monopoly. Now it's a two-way street, as you rightly defined. Now, everybody with a mobile phone is a television reporter. Everybody who can write is a columnist. Everybody who has a Twitter account is, two-line reporter. And they have their views. They put it out. They troll people. So that's the way communication is moving. But which allow you to verify. Now, what has happened in this day and age is that, what are the dangers, the disadvantage of a situation like this? The advantage of a situation like this is, of course, mass media is not held by a few people in chains. Now it's been unleashed. A story which is in Siliguri, it doesn't matter whether NDTV, CNN News 18, Z News is there or not. A simple person with a mobile phone can tell his story about what's happening in Siliguri. And if the content is good and if the images are convincing, then it goes viral and everybody around the world, till Chile, Peru, wherever there is internet, everybody can watch it. So that brings a certain democratization of content or information that is being passed on left, right, center. But the danger of it, as we've noticed, is with misinformation, fake news. What I thought in the beginning when Facebook came, when I saw Orkut come in, when I saw Twitter come in, was I saw this great democratization of news happening. So I said, now a few leaders will not be able to control the dialogue of the country. They'll not be able to control the narrative. The narrative will now be controlled by the people. But sadly, that has not happened. That's another disadvantage. Here we have a situation where leaders are able to engineer their campaigns, where troll armies work for a particular leader. You've seen that in the case of what happened here in India. You've seen that in the case of what happened in America. So it is false for us to believe just because information, the way we consume it and the way it is sent out has been democratized. It has not been happened. Now, this power is being misused by people in the form of campaigns, in the form of misinformation. So that is something that we need to look out for. And I guess at a time like this, then now there are fact checkers, there are verified pages so that you know the information that you're taking in is real information. So I think there are good sides to it and there are bad sides to it both.
Yeah. So you are saying that the powers that be, they are misusing the situation and they are, steering this thing to their own advantage. And the hapless common man, I mean, he is just taken for a ride. That's what I mean when we are referring to what happens in the elections in India as well as in America. That the common man he doesn't even know that he's being taken for a ride and he's being manipulated. There is so much of string pulling happening behind the scene. So that's quite a scary situation. Coming to think of it, that's quite a scary situation. Okay, so we as common people who are all the time in the digital domain, I mean, is there anything that we can do? I mean, how can we be more conscious, more aware of what we are doing, more critical of what we are doing? I mean, how do we protect ourselves from this?
I think the basic thing that you can do is, whenever you share information, whenever you look for information, look for verified pages that you can trust. That is one way of looking at information. Other is to continuously ask questions and not just believe in the WhatsApp university,
Right.
which kind of sends you all kinds of information. I think apart from that, in this digital day and age, it is very difficult because I often talk to my friends who are doing research in the US, here in India, on the internet, and they do paint very negative and a very dangerous picture of what the internet is and can do with our lives. The very narrative that you build around a person. So if you are using Facebook, if you are using Twitter, if you are using any of those social handles, if tomorrow a powerful person wants, with the technological wherewithal, can engineer the feeds in such a way that you receive only a limited narrative. So you will be surrounded by a narrative which somebody else wants you to see and hear. So in that case, and you saw what happened with Facebook in the Cambridge Analytica data leak.
Yes, Analytica, Cambridge Analytica,
yeah. So if you look at it, then there are these scary aspects to what digital and to what online can do, because at any point in time, bots are tracking you everywhere. What you do, what you eat, what's the sound that's coming out of your mouth. How many times have you said samosa? If you say samosa 10 times near your cell phone, the next time you open Facebook, you will see an ad of Haldiram's or any of those companies. So this is very scary. I keep testing those scenarios. And sometimes it does come true. So when we are in the digital world, these threats are always there. But I guess if sometimes just yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine who's done a doctorate in this in the US. And he was telling me, be safe by doing XYZ. But I said, can we really be safe? Because I'm on the mobile phone. My mobile phone is connected to the internet. I work on a computer, which is again connected to the internet. Sometimes I don't know what's going to happen. So it's very, very difficult. The only safe way that you can do is unplug yourself, use a wired telephone, and go to a jungle in Sikkim and live there. But I guess, we'll not be able to do that. So we'll have to live with this.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so on one hand, yes, we have to live with this. But then on the other hand, like if we make a comparison with television, we know that television is very much personality driven. Okay, so the TV stars, whether it is Rajdeep Sardesai or Pranay Roy or anybody, so they hold a star status. Okay, and even Coffee with Karan Johar. So we look forward to this. So it's very much you identify with a face, you identify with a personality. So this digital media, is this also personality driven? And if it is, that means can you have a fan following? Can you really become a star in the digital media and have a kind of fan following? The personality cult. On television, we have seen the personality cult, we have said. But digital media, is it the same thing that happens in digital media, the personality cult, or does it have a different kind of flavor? In the digital world, can you develop a fan following? If yes, then how? So how do you enhance your presence in the cyberspace? If you want to create a cult around yourself, so how does one do it?
Tanu, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I think it's pretty much the same, because if you see Instagram, or if you see YouTube, there are especially social media stars coming out, or even TikTok for that matter, now that it's banned. But, so there are especially social media stars which are being born, and they have massive following. And, so it is totally possible. So, celebrities are getting born on Instagram and YouTube. So that's what is happening for sure.
Yeah. So if some of our young attendees today, I mean, if supposing, so there is, I don't know, there may be some singers or rock stars or among those who are in the meeting today in the webinar. So what would you suggest to them? I mean, how to enhance your celebrity status? Some tips to them, because they're young professionals, they might like to become celebrities online. They might like to have a fan following to enhance their business or enhance their performance. So what tips would you like to give them?
I don't know if there are millennials watching right now, and if there are young people who are watching us right now, they will already know, and they'll make fun of Tanu and me, because the kids nowadays know much more about how to become a star than we. Because my son, who's just 12 years old, started a YouTube channel without telling me. And I discovered it, and he was mixing music and putting it on YouTube. And recently started a cooking show also with a little help for me. So these, I think kids know more about, how to spread themselves out on the internet and how to be famous. I think, apart from that, the strategies, what the internet demands from us, from what I know, I'm old now, so I sometimes feel that I'm going out of sync. What I've seen is that television needed personalities, but they were backed by brands, because all the broadcast equipment was very expensive. One broadcast van cost over 5 crore rupees. The studio itself cost a lot of money. So they needed a big business house to back them and provide the equipment and this entire thing, a satellite, to broadcast live for them. But today, every a kid with a smartphone has the broadcast equipment right in their hands. They have a studio, they have a camera, they have everything built into that one little gadget they carry around. So with that, the possibilities are endless. But what is most important here is that everything needs to have a personality. Even a brand like Mercedes, even a brand like Williams, even a brand, some of the biggest brands have a personality on the internet. It's not like they're a boring company there on internet just to announce, I've just built this car, I've just won this race. No, they show a certain personality. So they build a person around brands.
Yeah.
So a personal touch is what goes a long way. People are not looking for somebody to come like in a 9 o'clock show saying, hello and welcome, you're with CNN News 18, and I'm going to give you the news at 8 o'clock today. And the headlines are, that era is gone now. Today, people like to say, hey, hello, how are you guys? I'm fine. Hey guys, follow my YouTube channel, or, so they say things like that. So it's much more about a personal connect, because at the end of the day, a phone is a very personal thing. A person carries, goes to sleep with, early in the morning, goes to the bathroom with the phone. So he's in all odd places with the cell phone.
Yeah.
So you have to be, I think, very personal. You have to put yourselves out there, which I can't do very often sometimes. And Tanu, of course, she knows more about these things than me. So she can, I think, give more tips. Tanu?
Yeah, so I agree with Karma. So I mean, so there are a lot of benefits actually in the digital world, because you can actually, it's actually very low cost. First of all, anyone can start a website and start their own blog or start their own Insta page or a YouTube channel. So and then display their talent. And the second thing is that it's engaging. So right now, if you look at it, we can engage with our, participants. So which is not possible in a newspaper or a TV channel, right? It's only one way. So I think that's the of digital media. And of course, the disadvantage is, of course, like Karma already mentioned, that there's a lot of trolling, there's a lot of fake news. But I think that's also because it's in the stage of getting evolved, the digital media, the digital. So I think there soon, in a couple of years, I'm sure we will see more digital laws. So things will be more streamlined. So I think the things which are happening today will probably get much more toned down.
Okay. So that's, let's hope so, that things will fall into place, get more streamlined. Now we are passing to slightly chaotic stage.
I just wanted to add something very interesting is now developing with India. And I guess this will happen slowly. China had drawn its digital borders. So China is one country which has drawn its digital borders by limiting internet just within its country. So if you look at a lot of offerings in China, they have their own Facebook, they have their own WhatsApp, they have their own Google, they have their own, so they have their own ecosystem in China. They have not allowed anybody from outside to penetrate into China. So they are in a sort of a digital secluded, digital way. Although people are in China also are finding ways and means to access Facebook and all. But then those are the digital boundaries. Now, for the first time, we as a country have drawn a digital border by disallowing some of the Chinese apps, saying that they are stealing data. So after some time, we may also regress. We thought it was a worldwide network which opened up the world to us. So I could see what a person who's in Alaska was doing, or what a person in Ecuador was doing. I could, log on and even attempt an order from a restaurant in Ecuador. But now, with this age, the question also comes whether there'll be digital borders or not. And we are seeing some development towards their side, which is already done in China.
Yeah, true. So that means the digital world, what we imagine to be a borderless world, is we can have digital borders also, and China has shown the way. So, and India also is following suit in some ways, and which may be regressive, you are saying. We will suddenly go back in time because we'll shut ourselves out to certain things. Yeah, so that is also another thing we had not.
And the very technology. And the very technology which allowed for the connection to happen, the worldwide connection can happen. The very technology can be implemented so swiftly, and the taps can be turned down so swiftly that we won't even know.
Yeah. So we won't even know that we are concealed of that, we are in a cocoon kind of thing. Okay. So then all sorts of possibilities are there. Yeah, so that's what. Okay, but now with this new normal situation, I mean, it hasn't yet become normal, but whenever it becomes normal, it's going to be a new normal. So in new normal situation, do you think that there will be some new opportunities that will open up for business? Because now the business has taken a beating almost in every sector. But do you see opening up of new opportunities as far as business is concerned, or some new things happening in the new normal situation? When people are more dependent on the digital world and everything is happening digitally. So how do you envision the future, maybe 2 years down the line? Do you think things are going to change radically? Now we are seeing a radical change. We are definitely witnessing a radical change. But 2 years down the line, do you foresee something from your years of experience?
Okay, so yes, the growth rate has already become much faster than it would have without COVID. People are adopting to technology, and so we can even in our own business, EastMojo, we can see the jump in numbers. The jump in viewership has been almost 60-70% higher.
I see.
Than before COVID. So that is already happening. So then in terms of business, advertisers are shifting from traditional media to new media, digital. And so I think, and the radical changes, I think we will see soon in the near future. It's all going to be AI, machine learning. And, we have to, really be very, fast in adopting the technologies that is going to come. I think those are the people, those are the platforms that would survive.
Okay, but now if I am not mistaken, I think travel and food are the two areas you would like to focus on, from what I read about yourself, to promote Northeast to the rest of India. The travel and food are the two things that, that are helpful to reach out to the people. Okay, so in this new normal situation, do you think this travel and food are going to be as attractive as before, or will there be a difference? Because, traveling will obviously be a little restricted, not food so much perhaps. So do you think you have to change your strategies or rethink certain things?
Yes. So, my work has been mainly centered around media marketing. And of course, addressing your question, I think travel in the near future, travel tourism will be more domestic because people will be opting for more like road journeys, road travel, going to nearby destinations
Okay.
rather than, flying off somewhere. So I think there will be a growth in domestic tourism. But yeah, I personally don't focus so much on travel and tourism. But the other side, other than media, is films. So
Yeah.
we I run a film festival.
Yeah.
So where we interact. We have been organizing a film festival for the last 7 years.
Yes, yes.
And
yeah.
we have people coming from all across India, filmmakers, from Bombay, from South, from from Calcutta, coming to Guwahati, apart from people from Northeast. So the whole idea was to encourage talent, exchange of ideas, culture through cinema, through movies. And we did a lot of workshops and things like that. So I mean, in the new normal, I think I would do it. I think if I had to add technology, of course, I feel these kind of, nothing can replace a festival. I love the buzz of a festival, people coming together, so that I don't think that technology can ever take that space up. But I mean, it can always enhance. So let's say post COVID, I mean, of course, we will have our annual festival, but beyond that, we can always have the brand, the Brahmaputra Valley Film Festival brand running by doing a lot of digital interactions. So workshops can happen digitally, like, panel discussions, speaker interactions can continue, having throughout the year. So people don't have to be physically going to Guwahati anymore. So I think that's the value addition, but I definitely hope that, I can host the festival next year.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So although it's not the same thing as people actually coming together, but the next best thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. One very critical question that has been rankling in my mind, that suppose, like Karma's son started his YouTube channel, and, kids are all the time creating content, putting it out on YouTube or wherever. And in the COVID situation, it has accelerated. So much types of content is going up. How does one monetize on the content? If one aspires to make money, okay, then what are the possibilities? Going viral, making money. I mean, how does really one make money from the contents, digital contents?
Actually, it is one of the toughest things to do if you want to make money, from digital. Everybody thinks that it's easy. It's not easy. The early adopters of YouTube, the people who got in early, all the content creators and all who crossed 1 million plus subscribers and all, they made a lot of money. So the people who came in, the first movers, made a lot of money from YouTube. Same with Facebook, same with Insta influencers and all. So if you want to make money off the internet, it heavily depends on the kind of interaction that you have with your audience. So there are a couple of milestones that you have to cover, and Tanu can correct me if I'm wrong. One is the number of people who follow you. That's one criteria. But what happened was that a lot of people started getting fake followers, which means they started buying followers. So there is no interaction at all. You put a video, there are 50 likes. You put something, there is no interaction. So now the advertisers, the people who pay, have become smarter, and they look for interaction,
Yeah.
on these handles and all. So
Right.
once you have interest, so all these criteria is there. So if you have a lot of views, how many views? If you put out so you might be an excellent filmmaker. You might have done a brilliant film and you put it out on YouTube, and you have, say, 2,500 views. But a guy who's sitting in the farm has shot a cow jumping from a wall, and it's very badly shot on a very poor resolution phone. And there is nothing, that video goes viral, and that has 5 lakh, 6 lakh views. And so monetization is dependent on all those things. If Tanu can add something.
Yes, so Karma is right. So, it's no longer about followers and likes anymore. So it's more about interaction, which is engagement. And the other metric is impressions. So, which is how many times someone has seen your, post, or someone has viewed your video. So these are the ways you can monetize your content.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I was planning to ask Karma when he said that his son has also started a YouTube channel. He said the millennial kids are much more savvy. They know how to make their presence felt. So I was reminded of a story, I mean, a real life story, which it came out as a news report, that young boys, I think somewhere in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, in order to get likes on his Facebook page, he did something very gory, something very cruel to an animal, to a street dog or something like that, took a video and put it up. I'm forgetting the details or something like that, just to get those likes and get the eyeballs, etc. So these millennial kids, they are there in the digital space all the time. But, they're becoming responsible netizens, the ethics, the etiquettes that they have to follow. So do you think there should be some kind of a training in the school, or some kind of awareness has to be created about their behavior when they are, everybody's behavior, and not only the youngsters' behavior, when we are out there on the internet, and certain things we should not do, we should not step into people's stores like that. Okay, because these kids are very tech savvy, so they go online, they do all sorts of, they are very active, but being a little responsible, what far-reaching implications their actions might have, maybe they don't have the foresight to see that. All right, so this sort of a awareness creation, a sort of education, do you think that has to be formalized in any way? That should be a part of school curriculum and things like that?
It's a very interesting idea, because I never thought of it. But for me, social media and the internet is an extension of who we are. It's an extension of what we are. But I have noticed often, and I've been watching social media for a long time, the social media grow. When I was in TV, all these social media things started. I have seen that people act and behave very differently when they are on when they are in person and when they are on the social media.
Correct.
I have noticed people who have come on my talk shows who are very shy in front of me, not speaking very much. But the moment they are on Twitter, they go ballistic. They turn into this completely different, often sometimes demonic people. So I think the education is the education that you give children, to be kind, to be polite to people, and the same etiquettes follow. But there's this certain, I would say, a wall or shadow that people think that they have the moment they appear on social media, and they can say whatever. Now that is changing because people are becoming aware. And police are also acting. So recently there was this lady in Mumbai, and I thought that the action that was taken was in the extreme. I do not, of course, want people to go to the extreme. But this was in reference to the dog meat debate in Nagaland. And she went to the extreme of saying that people from Nagaland and the entire Northeast must be chopped, or, some violence done to them. So she said that on a Facebook live.
Okay.
Immediately a case was filed, and Nagaland police reached Mumbai. She was arrested, and she was taken all the way from Mumbai on a flight to Imphal, from Imphal on a car, and she was taken. So I think, so people are slowly becoming aware that there is a law which exists on when you are here in the real world, and the same laws extend to the virtual world. That what needs to be trained to children is, I think, which I do with my son on a daily basis, is how vulnerable you are in a digital world, how people can steal your identity, how people can steal so many things of yours in the virtual world. So that education needs to be given. Apart from that, I think the other trainings can happen at home like we do, and it's just, I don't know, then it'll be just too much. There'll be too many trainings to be given to everybody.
Yeah.
It was, if I may, Shubhati, if I may come in at this point. So one of the comments was that actually, ethics should be part of education, just everyday education. I did see a couple of questions coming in.
Questions actually have come up. Yeah.
And if I may just point out to a couple of those. So, we're talking a lot about the digital world. One of the questions which Ajantari has asked in the chat is, what do you make of the future of print media, newspapers, etc.? Will it survive the digital avalanche? What do you feel? Tanushree, what's happening in in the magazines and print, actual print?
I mean, I love newspapers. There was a time when I used to read almost all the newspapers that were available early in the morning. That was my first ritual that I did. I really wanted to, get through all the papers because they give me. Now, an interesting change is happening around the world, and I saw it happen. There was a time when television came, radio came, you all know this debate. They said that newspapers were going to die. Did newspapers die? They did not die. The physical newspaper may die, but the print, if you I don't know how to say it. You will not get a newspaper in print, but you may get newspaper in digital. And that is going to happen just because of the way the world is moving to. Because of COVID, a lot of people are scared about, actually physically getting the newspaper in hand. So that way, I was speaking to some of my friends in Hindu, and so that way, it did hurt them in a huge way. I do not think that newspapers will altogether vanish. Like in the West, in some of the countries, what's happening is that the way of reporting is changing. Newspapers are not doing he said, she said kind of reports. Newspapers are not going to do, okay, in Chaurangi today, this happened at this point, the person fell down, the rickshaw broke down. No, they're going to do in-depth studies. So I see newspapers evolving more as a media where there'll be in-depth research, where papers will be published, where there'll be investigative journalism. That will be the space of these newspapers, and day-to-day reporting of what happened, where, who killed who, which dog fell in love with the neighbor's dog, the puppy is so beautiful that it's breaking the internet. That kind of stories will just change over naturally to the social media world. I think that's what's going to happen. But I think, I believe slowly the physical newsprint, as to say, that will cease to exist.
So I'm saying that, so print media, yes, it'll stay for a few more years in India, but eventually it will, the medium itself will go away. But, the brands which are right now on print, they will just choose a different media, which is digital. So from print, they will go to digital. So I see all of them slowly moving to digital. And also, vernacular, regional languages, it's coming up in a big way. So what is the future of digital media is video. Of course, you have seen video is going big. Then voice is also coming up, podcast, So, and the third thing is vernacular. So I think these are the 3 V's of digital media, which is going to, take over the near future in India.
So I think a follow-up question which was asked by Jyotirmoy was, should digital media houses then start charging for content from its audience? Or is it okay to kind of give the content away for free, as it is being done primarily now?
So yes, there's a very fine line because ultimately, the main source of revenue for a media house is advertisements. So you can choose either model. If you can have really, really exclusive, content, let's say investigate with journalism, in depth, reporting, and then have a very niche followers, and then maybe put a subscription model or pay-per-view, paper article kind of a thing. But otherwise, if you want to be a mass media brand and you want and followers, you want lakhs of viewers, so then the only way is to keep your content free, or otherwise you could have a mixed model as well.
Got
Yes.
it.
There is another question from that same person, Jyotirmai Hazarika, that will the various news web portals interfere with the recalibrating of the media landscape? Will the various news web portals interfere? Interfere meaning what exactly you mean by interfere?
I was wondering if anybody wanted to join the chat to ask the questions live. Like we mentioned, raise your hand and the administrator will allow you in with your video and audio to ask the speakers live. So if anybody would like to join at this point of time, join in the session, just raise your hands and we'll try and accommodate you, with your video and audio. So somebody actually responded to in the chat saying, New York Times, BBC, Guardian already charges in terms of subscription for digital articles. So we're wondering, will that kind of be the way forward for India? Is that something which you see happening in future?
Well, in India, Hindu charges, I know. Hindu doesn't give it away free. Hindu charges, not the other newspapers so far. Yeah.
So, for you to be able to be confident that a person will pay and buy that a bit of information, because as you started the whole discussion by saying content is king, the content has to be compelling. The good thing that has happened is that now with digital, people have accepted and they are comfortable with paying online. Before we were very hesitant to put our credit card, pay online. Now with increased safeguards, it's very easy to, there's security. With security, it's become very easy. Now with all the mobile apps, the payment apps, you can just click, scan the code and you can send money. So it's very easy. So, I see change when I go out and see the local panwala gladly accepting a mobile payment. He's very comfortable with receiving mobile payments now. People are buying chewing gum. People are buying things which they should not eat by just paying or, by just paying with a click. So now this has made it easy. Now slowly people are adapting. If your content is compelling, if your stories are so good that people would want to read it, and if you're confident that you are willing to go behind a paywall, then you can. But for example, eastmojo.com, do we want to go behind a paywall right now? No, we cannot afford to go behind a paywall because we are just a baby. I would say we're just 2 years old, learning to walk. We would want more people to notice us. We would want more people to say that, okay, this kid is growing up to be a strong boy or a girl. She's going to lead. She's going to tell us the most beautiful stories. So she's going to rise. And when her potential, East Mojo's potential is seen by the general public that she can be a super athlete one day, and let's invest in her, let's sponsor her. And every rupee given to a good independent media channel is just safeguarding that your interest is protected, that the media reports what you want to hear, not what the government wants to hear. So for independence of the media, it's very important that the media channel or the network is truly independent, of control by politicians, of control by whosoever, and of control by corporates. So the charge has to come from the citizens themselves. They should be willing to say, okay, East Mojo is from the East. I want to support East Mojo. So it's all right. I will pay 250 rupees, but I will see that they are accountable. And every time they are not accountable, I'm going to write to them and saying that your stories are not good. You better buck up. But here's my 250 rupees initially to support you.
Yeah.
Got it. So there was a question from Priyant, I see, which says, what would be the future of cinema halls post-COVID, with people becoming more and more used to OTT platforms? I miss those movie halls personally, very much. I know, even with Netflix, even with Prime, Hotstar, all of that, there's something comforting, I guess, which I do miss. But it is a valid question.
But I think it's changing. I think people ultimately, post-COVID, people would want to be again back in crowds, back with friends, back with extended families. So I think cinema halls will come back. Of course, it's going to be very difficult as a business to sustain their losses for a long period of time. So I see only if this continues for a longer time, smaller.
Again,
I know Tanushree frozen for a little bit, and one of the maybe innovative things could be, and I know friends of mine in the West have done this, is cinema halls have actually made it like drive-in. Of course, you have to have the space. So in the West and the US, have the space to like make it open air. Theaters where you just drive in and you're in the safety of your car and you are watching. So I don't know if that's something which to think about going forward. So
I think like Tanushree said, and we've had this discussion before also, that I'm very confident that, post-COVID, that the situation will return to normal and people will return to cinema halls. And just before we lost her, she was saying that people are going to return one. But what is going to happen is that those people only with deep pockets will survive. So you will see many smaller, sad to say, but mom and pop kind of cinema halls might have to close down unless they own the entire property. The other thing that you saw, the shift in cinema viewing, what you saw is you saw a certain spurt in multiplexes. So you saw one hall with a lot of screens. So you have 4 or 5 screens with limited seating. I think, that change will be towards that. So it will be smaller cinema halls where you can take your entire family and book the entire cinema hall. So you'll get that audio visual experience if you're not, able to invest in a proper audio hi-fi systems for your home. Tanu's back, I think.
Yeah, Tanu, sorry. Did you want to just add something? We lost you because
summed it up well, so that's fine.
Great. So there was a question on fake news from Ajanta. It said, do you see proliferation of organizations like ATT News to fight the menace of fake news? Is cyber policing taking akin to, say, China, a sustainable model going forward?
I truly do not think that cyber policing will really work in a country like India or in the world, because very well, especially the young people, if in the internet, if you block X route, you guys will find Y, Z, A, B, C, D. You'll find thousands of routes to reach your destination. So there are different ways of doing things. I think policing is not the way forward. Yes, when it comes to fake news in particular, we have a lot of these networks which have started, whose just the work solely is to identify fake news, report fake news, and let the public know. So they are like Boom, you gave one example. So there are lots of these news organizations which have the capabilities. Even our journalists are trained, but we've not, really been certified yet as a fake news site, watching site. So all that. So I think that will happen. But policing, I don't think that's a feasible way.
Tanushree, did you want to add something, or can I ask a follow-up question on that? During the time of registration, we had also given an option to participants signing on to ask any questions. So one of the questions which had come through registration at that time from Dr. Sumita Basu was, are there any regulatory bodies in media which monitors authenticity of news? So any regulatory bodies in media which you know of, which monitors authenticity of news?
I don't think there are any regulatory bodies. PIB, the Press Information Bureau, have now started a fact check website. But we've seen even them falter sometimes with the kind of fact checking that they do. The television channels, when we had come together and formed an organization, so the government gave us an option at that time saying, what do you want to do? So when the television channels came together and formed an organization, we said that we are going to self-regulate. So self-regulation was what was agreed to. The moment self-regulation was agreed to, there was a body which was formed, and the body is always headed by a former judge of the Supreme Court, a former judge of the Supreme Court. So that was self-regulation that we'd agreed to when it comes to television. So right now also, with so many numerous websites, every state I think has 100, 200 websites now, which claim to be news websites, and they are copying, pasting from everywhere. Apart from that, there must be like thousands of Facebook news pages, Twitter news pages, that it's very difficult to control, to monitor everybody and anybody. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting had recently said that they are going to start registering digital media portals also, and there will be certain guidelines which will be given. But again, that was not accepted by many, so that there was an intense debate saying again that was a way to muzzle the media. So we'll have to see going forward where it goes. But right now, as far as the regulatory bodies there is nothing. Tomorrow, if one of you want to start a website, you can go ahead and start a news website.
I think, Shubhati, maybe we'll just take the last question and then, do concluding remarks. And I think this is, maybe Vibha Bhartia had his question answered already, but it was about piracy. What about piracy? If one person pays and shares the content, how would a subscription model work for non-multimedia digital news? And I think a little bit of that was addressed by Karma, about the checks and balances, which is trying to be a thing. And then I guess this was a follow-up question of how would a subscription model work for non-multimedia digital news? A subscription model work for...
Non-multimedia digital news, meaning like a traditional media? Vibha, if you can just explain.
Vibha, if you would like to type, or if you want to join in and ask that, you're welcome, because even I wasn't sure, where we were going with that.
I'm Vibha Bhatia speaking. Good evening.
Good evening, Vibha. Yeah.
So, thank you. It was a very nice program. And regarding the question, actually, what I meant was like someone, let's say, got a good news article from any of the subscription model websites. And they share it with their friends or whoever they want. So if it's supposed to be a paid content, how are they going to prevent a person on a digital platform from doing that?
Okay, so the question is basically, so let's say I am a subscriber to EastMojo. So then if I read the article and I share it on my page, my other friends and followers won't be able to access it unless they sign up and subscribe to the same. I hope that's what you are trying to ask, right?
So no, if one person's already subscribed to it, so then he can share it.
Oh, he can share the password. Yes, there is no, yes, of course, you cannot stop that.
So we go back to ethics, Vibhav.
So it's like the lock in your house, right? So you lock up your house and then you think that lock is going to keep your house safe. But, I always say that a lock is for honest thieves because honest thief will see there's a lock and he'll walk away. But a real thief wants to come into your house, he'll break the lock. So the lock is only a deterrent. So all these subscription paywalls can only be a deterrent. But what is happening is that increasingly, technology is technology, It's getting smarter and smarter and smarter and way smarter than us. Now they are picking up a lot of things. Now, if you read an article and you want to share it, you can share it, but the others won't be able to read it because only people like Tanushri said with password and with that, with the thing will be able to read it. Now you have a Netflix password and you have a Netflix thing. But if you share that Netflix password to your friend and you want to watch this wonderful romantic movie with your girlfriend tonight, you'll not be able to watch it because your friend is already watching, that beautiful romantic movie with her boyfriend. Because you two screens cannot be alive at one time. Netflix doesn't care if you share passwords, but the software is so intelligent that it sees that at any time around the world, it doesn't matter you are in Peru, you are wherever in the world. I love Peru so much. That's why I keep giving Peru example. It doesn't matter, but it's just that one subscription is working at that
Right.
time.
Got it.
Thank you.
So thank you.
So,
Shubhati,
Now
Yeah.
that
no, I
So
said if you make a skirt and share to help it, that's the
right.
So Shubhati, I'm going to just request you to make
Yes,
concluding
sum up.
remarks or invite Karma and Tanushree if they want to share any last thoughts and concluding remarks on this recalibrating the media landscape. And then we'll
Right.
close
So
out for the
actually,
evening.
I have been quite engrossed in all these ideas that were thrown up, and some of them, particularly the comments from Karma, were a little scary, whereas Tanushree was more optimistic. So Tanushree believes that the chaos at the moment is going to get streamlined, and the fake news and all these things, they are going to have die a natural death. Okay, and Karma, on the other hand, is very skeptical about how we are which is of course a very real fear, how we are manipulated, and we don't even realize that we are being manipulated, and at a very big level, at a political level and all that. Then about the digital boundary, that even in a so-called boundaryless world, these boundaries can come up, and then we won't even know that we are confined within a boundary, like in China and in India also it's happening, and things like that. So these are so many developments, and we are in fact, human intelligence is maybe too small, too little to grapple with this rapid changes and the way the artificial intelligence is growing. Okay, but how the human intelligence is going to cope up with this artificial intelligence, and which intelligence eventually will be on top. So that again is a matter of concern. As Karma was saying, that artificial intelligence is growing, and machines, the technology, the algorithms are way too intelligent. But of course, human intelligence has always so far found a way of cracking. But it's a war between human and artificial intelligence. So things are becoming complex, going to some extent beyond our comprehension also, and we need conversations like this, we need sessions like this to open our eyes, our eyes as well as the youngster, new generation, millennial kids' eyes also. Okay, because sitting in our own niche, we have very limited understanding, but having discussions like this always opens up thoughts, and it generates a lot of food for thought. Okay, so now just one parting question to both of you, that all of us aspire to have a digital presence these days. So to all those who are present here, that how does one create a niche for oneself in this din of this digital space? So if both of you would share your perspective, so with those parting thoughts, perhaps we can end the seminar. So in this din, in this chaos, how do you create a niche for yourself?
So I want to address your first part of the question. Yeah, you're you're saying there's the fear of artificial intelligence maybe taking over in the near future, but I think there is still hope. I mean, in the sense, like, ultimately artificial intelligence is coming out from human intelligence.
Yes.
So as long as we can be wiser, we can be aware, not believe whatever is thrown at us, and like Karma said, ask questions. So I think there is no way, like, I don't see artificial intelligence, becoming smarter than humans. So on that note, I think, to sum it up, like how you're saying, how do we create a niche for ourselves? So I think, the best way of going about it would be, like, from my personal experiences, would be how you can, combine your interest, your passion, and with your strengths and skill set. I think if you can manage to do this, I think, and anything, you can definitely create that niche, which is very exclusive, which is very special, which is very different from everyone else. Otherwise, you can be trying to copy someone else, but you'll never be able to, make a persona or personality for yourself.
Yeah. So basically, we have to know your strength and skill sets, and also what really interests you, not what is just fashionable, but what really interests you. Okay, and with that, you have to follow your passion and hone your skills further, and then eventually you will be noticed. Yeah. Okay, so that's very nice, very optimistic thought. Karma, last words from you. Not
so my co-founders. My co-founders optimistic. I'll tell you about artificial intelligence. In the last 2 months, the entire newsroom of MSN, so Microsoft News, Microsoft used to run news in their landing page, so they used to get huge views and all. That entire team has been laid off. Now the news from all around the world is curated by robots. There is a robot who's picking up news left, right, and center. So the humans have been replaced. So is that the future of the newsrooms? I don't know.
Yeah.
The second question that you asked on, what do you want to be? How do you create a niche? I think you need to be yourself. You are yourself. You know all your strengths. You know all whatever you're passionate about, as Tanushree said. In this real life, when you are flesh and blood, you need to show that same self and that same passion and take all that onto the social media if you want to be. If you don't want to be on social media, that's your choice. But you need to stay safe and take care of yourself. If you are real, I don't know what the millennials call that. There is a word. I keep forgetting. If you're real out there, if you put yourself out there, you will make a mark on the digital world also. I'm sure they already know about it. And they must be calling me a fool right now for saying all this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think that answers this question also. What is the difference between older media and new media? Or in terms of ethics? Okay. Because this new media is what you said, that the artificial intelligence will take over, and instead of a human news reader, there is a robo news reader. That is the new media that is in the horizon that we can see. But yeah, in terms of ethics, I think it's basically the same ethical principles that need to be followed. This is one ethics question that's there from Prapti Vaidya.
So I think they have kind of, in the interest of time, we'll try and I think the ethics part has been answered. So I just want to leave the session with this thought that, artificial intelligence or not, we need people like Karma, we need people like Tanushree, and we certainly need people like Shubhati. So I do hope the new world, the new media going forward, we do learn to coexist, and one doesn't really, lose the human face to the media. So with that, a very big thank you, Karma, Tanushree, thank you so much for being honest, being forthright, sharing your thoughts, sharing your journey and perspectives. Shubhati, thank you for being an amazing moderator. Thank you for, chairing this session. And with that—
Thank you for organizing this with Sri, and to Pragya.
From all of us at iLead, and thank you and have a very good evening. Thank you for joining us, all of you, and we look forward to having more of these.